Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, rate, or review the show on your favorite platform. We truly appreciate your feedback and would be honored if you shared the podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Today, my guest is Amanda Trisdale. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Why don't you start us off just telling me a little bit about yourself?
Well, like you said, my name is Amanda. I have a 13-year-old daughter who was diagnosed as autistic fairly young for a girl. She was almost 3, which is at that point in time was unheard of to be diagnosed that young. I myself am autistic. Her dad shows autistic tendencies. She was nonverbal, and not only did she not express herself, she had no receptive verbal skills when she was young, which made life interesting to say the least.
Right.
When she was 6, one of her therapists suggested we get her into tap because one of her common stems is a very complicated tap move. She's excelled in dance, but she's had problems fitting in traditional studios. They are just not meant for autistic dancers. You get segregated either in the autism dance classes or you're thrown into neurotypical classes, which were not designed for you. But she excels in dance to the point she is a member of Chloe Arnold's international youth tap company, Soul Talk. She works with Emmy-nominated, Tony Award-winning choreographers and just cannot fit in at traditional studios. She's always kind of pushed to the side, considered the autistic girl. Last fall, she got kind of fed up with it. And if I'm putting up with this, then what are kids who don't have the Hollywood and New York connections putting up with?
Right.
So she convinced her dad and I to start a nonprofit dance studio here in Colorado Springs that is designed from the ground up for autistic people.
That's
and
amazing.
We have classes ranging from ages 3 to 99 at the moment.
Wow.
Because strangely,
go ahead.
Autism, contrary to popular belief, does not disappear at 18.
Right. So she was involved with those big name choreographers while she was at the traditional dance studio?
She was. Okay. She is pretty much self-taught because she was pushed to the side to watch everyone do dance classes. But the big name choreographers have never really seen her autism. They just see her.
Right.
Which is kind of a weird disconnect because when she goes into traditional dance studios, they automatically just peg her as the autistic kid.
Right.
Whereas in the big name choreographers, Chloe at the top of the list, who is an amazing woman, has mentored my daughter and loves her like her own child a lot of times.
Right.
Sees Leta.
Right.
And is, an amazing supporter. She's a cheerleader. She's always behind her. But then you take Leta where she should be getting that at a traditional dance studio, and she's being told she's not good enough. She's not worthy of being at these big events and on these big stages. And it's like, there's a disconnect here.
Right. So what do you think the disconnect is? Why do you think like the big name person is, just looking at her as a whole person, whereas like the traditional studio is, seeing the autism and looking at that part of it?
I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about autism. I think these traditional studios, because we've talked to a lot of the studios in town who are like, but we support the autistic community, but they don't know what autism is.
Right.
And I think the big names were seeing Leta for her dancing skills and going, but she's amazing. We don't care about her autism. We just care about who she is. And these traditional studios have a more focus on teaching, and they do have big hearts, but they don't know what they don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Of course, he's going to bark right. Hey, I will call her. He's like, you're not paying attention to me.
You're not paying attention. That's okay. What is your definition of inclusion?
I think Kentucky, come over here. He's like, I should be included. understanding and loving the person for where they're at and not trying to tell them what their disability is.
Right.
Because they probably know their disability and their parents know their disability better than you do.
Right.
Hold on 2 seconds.
That's fine.
Hey. Lay down. He's like, I'm used to being on the podcast. He usually has his own thing and everything. Let me grab her to come grab her doggy real quick.
That's fine.
She's got one doggy upstairs, and we were like, maybe if we separate them. Can you come get Jackie Poo for 2 seconds? Thanks. Or at least bring him his. I brought my coffee cup down and forgot to bring his coffee cup down. He's spoiled rotten.
Oh, no, that's no problem.
He's a pit bull, but I think he was absent the day they gave out any brains and or ability to be a big, brave dog.
Okay.
Inclusion is really about meeting the person where they're at, not waiting and telling them who. Now he's like, you came to get me. He's like, you came to get me. Hi, I think. He's like, no, I want all the attention in the world. You're interrupting the podcast.
I want to be included, though. I can't hear you anymore. You must have muted.
It muted when he hit me.
That's fine.
He is a pathetic little pity who's on anxiety meds and everything. So he's like, yes, no, inclusion includes anxiety, right?
Exactly, it does.
It is really about meeting the person where they're at and not coming up with what your idea of their disability is, because you don't necessarily know everything about their disability. Unless you happen to be like the medical expert in their field, and even they keep, writing papers, finding something new.
Right, for sure. So you said that you have autism? Is that what you said too?
Yeah, it was Asperger's back when I was a kid, but now it's on the spectrum. Yeah.
So you kind of knew something about that before your daughter was diagnosed, right?
Yeah. I was probably the weird parent because I talked to all these neurotypical parents who are like, I am so upset about my child having autism. I don't understand it. And I'm like, yay, she had autism. I don't have to worry about her being different from me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my experience was I didn't know anything about or don't remember hearing about disability or any of that experience growing up. So when my daughter was diagnosed with stuff, I had to learn it all. So yeah, I come from that side of it. So
there are a lot of good parents who come from that side who are understanding. And then with autism, I have found there's a lot of parents who aren't as inclusive as you would hope.
Interesting.
There are books out there about how to mourn your child when they're diagnosed with autism. There's books on how to mourn your grandchild when they're diagnosed with autism.
Wow. I did not know
that. Which is sad. We've had a lot of issues starting the studio with parents going, well, I want my child to become neurotypical. I want them to be Elon Musk. I want him to be Steve Jobs. I want him to be Alan Menken. And I'm like, I think you just named 3 guys who are definitely not neurotypical.
Right. Yeah.
But they're looking in.
Yeah. That is an interesting piece of it because, looking back, first of all, you think you know about parenting or that stuff, but you have no idea what's happening before you have kids, or at least I didn't. And then my daughter, so I have a son that's 15 months older, so he would be considered neurotypical, nothing going on. And then she was born, so my only reference was him. And then you kind of, you definitely go through those thinking about what the future is like in that part of it. But for me, it was never really wanting to change her into a certain thing. It was just meeting her where she is. So, yeah.
I think the best parents just meet them where they are. And it's like, I was talking to someone last week who was like, but they're surrounded by parents with neurotypical and typical kids who they're comparing their kids to those kids. And it's like, quit comparing your children.
Right. Yeah, that's also true. So why did you start the dance company in the Heartland and not in the big metropolitan area?
Well, there's two reasons. Number one, my husband's Space Force, and here's where we're stationed for the next few years.
There's that, yeah.
And two, his family has been here for a couple hundred years, so this is home to him.
Okay. Yeah.
Like they have the pioneer plates and all that fun jazz. So
There you go. So is the dance student company just for people with autism then, or can anybody join?
it is just for people on the spectrum. We
Okay.
are a nonprofit because there is no way we could afford. We could probably ask parents to pay what it costs us to put on these classes, but
Right.
I did the math again yesterday, and for our preschool classes, it would be $600 a month per student,
Okay.
which is not fair to ask parents. So we are
Right.
currently in our end of the year, please give us money campaign.
Sure.
Our class sizes, every single one of our students has what we are currently calling a dance studio version of an IEP. We bring them in and we do a full-fledged IEP that we've got some therapists and therapy groups helping us tweak for the dance studio.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of things parents and traditional dance studio owners don't get about autism. Like Velvet is the devil. A lot of autistic dancers have sensory issues are across the board, but Velvet
Right.
and autism do not go together.
Sure.
There people see autism as a learning disability, but there's a lot of physical effects that go with autism. We need to know a lot of those for our dance teachers. Leta's struggled from time to time with silent seizures. That's another problem she said it had in traditional studios because people are like, oh, she zoned out and wasn't listening to me. I'm like, yeah, because she was seizing.
Right. Yeah.
We also, our class sizes for our preschool and for our level 3 ASD dancers, we don't go above 3 students in a class.
Okay.
Which also raises the cost of
Right.
dance classes. Our largest class size is 5 dancers, and that's for kids like Leta who are higher functioning, don't need as much support. But even then, we don't introduce vocabulary the same way that the traditional studios do. We don't introduce 15 to 20 vocab words in a day and go, hi, memorize these.
Right.
We're introducing slowly. And I think for right now, it makes more sense to focus directly on what these dancers need.
Yeah. So how many are you able to meet the needs of everybody that wants to be a dancer at your studio, or do you have like a wait list or?
We are currently a little bit on the not completely able to meet all the needs. One of the reasons is we do not have our own studio space yet. We are working
Okay.
with a partner to try and get our own studio space.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're in other dance studios, we have to go when they don't have classes right now.
Sure.
But we have an amazing company that I cannot wait until January when I'm allowed to name them, who is going to give us 5 figures to work on renovating a space we have found.
Awesome.
We just need to raise $3,800 in the next month to try and get that first month's rent because they're a business. They can't give us money until January.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
we'd like to expand, especially the adult classes, because we have a lot of adults who would love to do this, but we don't have time when they have time.
Oh, sure. So that's interesting. You said you're using like space in other dance student companies' buildings. Is that what you said? Okay.
Right. For right now, we are grabbing other dance studios have been kind enough to let us come in at discounted rates to use their facilities.
That's cool. That's awesome. So talk a little bit more about the dance version of the IEP. I mean, my daughter had an IEP her whole school career, so I know what an IEP is. Can you like go into a little more depth of like your process of what you do when you get a new dancer and how the IEP fits into it? Or your version
So
of
most
it?
of the parents, this is where it's fun trying to go between the autistic world and the dance world, because the dance world's looking at me going, what the heck is an IEP?
Right.
And
sure.
I talk to parents and they're like, oh, tell me more about this. We take off out all the stuff that you don't need for the IEP. We don't need to know whether or not you can get onto the school bus. We don't need to know,
Right.
you know, a lot of the school specific stuff. But there's a lot of stuff we do need to know. Like we are going to ask you, how's your child at changes in their schedule? Like what are we looking at when we're
Right.
in a combo class and we're changing from ballet to tap? Is that going to not be a problem, but just need a little extra support and help?
For sure.
Um, what's your child's language? Receptive and expressive language is such a big part of autism. We need to know where they are in that journey
Yeah.
because we don't want to be trying to get a child who doesn't have receptive language to understand. We're definitely on the sensory issues because there are so many fabric things in dance. I don't want to be planning for a recital and have your child in a fabric they cannot stand.
Right.
I have a daughter who you just saw on screen for a little bit dealing with the puppy. Leta cannot stand sleeves and she cannot stand pants. She can wear shorts and she can wear, shirtless, but it'll be 30-degree weather down here and she'll be out in shorts. And
Yeah.
and this is so autistic of her, there is one specific pair of shorts she wears. And if Nike Pro line ever stops making that pair of shorts, we are in trouble.
So do you have like 10 pairs in different sizes just in case they run
Oh,
out of
we
them?
do. It is even, and this is something that, I mean, our IEP goes into some very details. Tights and ballet dancers are like, you expect it. I don't want to put a kid in a pair of tights that is going to have a meltdown or be masking their meltdown the entire
Right.
class. You can't learn that way. Um, Lita's a tap dancer. We went through one day, we spent 2 days at a tap store trying on tap shoes. So we got a pair that didn't drive her sensory issues crazy.
Right.
I'm not putting your child in a pair of tap shoes that they can't handle. We do have a dance wear sponsor that we cannot wait. It's another business that come January, we get to tell everyone what businesses are
Yeah.
supporting us.
Sure.
I gotta love the businesses. They like tell you months in advance. We've been sitting on some of this knowledge for like 6, 8 months,
Yeah.
but they all go in January. Um, we're divvying up our classes once we get to the space. If we've got kids who have sensory issues with lights, which, is par for the course with autism, I want to be able to use those IEPs to kind of go, okay, here's your sensory issues with lights. We're going to put you in a class with kids who also have the same sensory issues so we
Right.
can have the lights at the certain level.
True.
Sound, there are some ways that there's loop, they're not earplugs, but they're like kind of weird hearing aids for autistic kids that help with the sounds.
Hmm.
I need to know if we need to put medical devices in for your kid like that. The texture issues are like so ridiculously in depth though,
Hmm.
because it's just not fair to these kids. The sound issues, my daughter absolutely hates loud noises. She's a tap dancer. Do not try to get that to make sense. She absolutely loves the sound of her tap shoes. She is an urban tap dancer. So when she taps, she will you can hear her from the street in theaters. That's how loud she will tap. She cannot handle the crowd clapping after her pieces.
Hmm.
She has to be pulled off stage. And it's like, this is something I need to know because I'm not going to have your child in a position where they are uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a lot of. I mean, it seems like a lot of. I mean, I don't know how to phrase this. It seems like a lot of extra work. That extra is probably not the right word, but you are going way more in depth. I mean, I don't know a lot about dance, but to me, it seemed like when I've seen dance competitions, everybody's wearing like the same outfits, right? So they just normally will be like, "Hey, this is what you have to wear. You don't have a choice." Whereas you're more open to figuring out what works best for them.
Yeah, that's exactly what the dance world is. Like Lita has been told you have to wear pants, you have to wear
Right.
velvet. She will mask, but that doesn't mean she likes you by the end of the season. And teachers are
Right.
like, "Why doesn't she like me?" And I'm like, "Cuz you asked her to not be herself the entire year.
Right. Yeah.
What makes you think she likes you the same way you like her?"
Yeah. For sure. That's interesting.
Um We also, especially because she has gotten yelled at over her stimming because teachers have tried to correct her stim.
Right.
I would like our teachers to be aware that what your child does, not to correct it, but so they don't correct it. Because I've
Right.
got a teenager who is really ready to pop off to you at this point,
Yeah.
going, "Do you understand what the unconscious and subconscious means when you're stimming?"
Yeah. So
You can't
does
correct my moves.
do your dancers like compete in like competitions then, or is it more
We
just
are
for?
not
Okay.
currently. They are just doing productions and shows and concerts.
Okay.
But if one of them came up and said they wanted to compete, I will probably take a chill pill or two because I have done competitions and they are sensory overloads for me.
Right. Yep.
But we will support them if that's what they want.
Are there any other dance companies like this that you're aware of in the United States?
The only one we are aware of that is completely autistic is up in Ontario, Canada. There are a lot
Okay.
of studios that have autism classes. They do not ask you anything other than, is your child autistic?
Right.
And they tend to put them in with Down syndrome, Parkinson's disease, the wheelchair
Okay.
users,
Yep.
and treat them all like they're the same.
Right. So
And they're,
it's more like a disability dance class, all disabilities
yeah,
together. Okay.
and they tend to run between 15, or like normal traditional classes, they run between 10 to 25 kids in a class.
Right.
And that just doesn't, if you want the kids to actually learn with autism, you kind of need to narrow that down dramatically.
Right.
We've also been lucky enough, we have therapists who are dance teachers.
Oh, nice.
And so they are coming up like how to teach. We are not doing adaptive. We are doing actual dance classes. We're just kind of adapting how we're teaching it,
Right.
but we're expecting you to learn dance.
Yeah.
For most of the autism, it's adaptive. So if you want to be like Leta and go semi-pro and pro, you cannot be in the autistic classes. You have to be in the neurotypical classes.
Gotcha.
Um, our teachers are, and they are amazing teachers that I think half the studios in town are mad at me for taking because they have worked in the traditional dance world for 20 plus years in the evening. And during the daytime, they're speech and language pathologists, they're OTs, they're
Oh, sure.
physical therapists.
So you're stealing all of them?
It wasn't so much stealing. We didn't go looking for them. They came looking for us.
Yeah.
The word got out there and they're all like, "Ooh, this is what I have always wanted to do."
So yeah. What are the some of the things you hear from like them and the reasons they want to come over to your studio and do it the way you're doing it?
A lot of it is the approach. The approach is very much what the autistic world needs. It's
Right.
coming from, people in the autism world who know autism.
Yeah.
And they're like, "You know what we need. You aren't all the other autistic programs in dance are designed by people who aren't therapists, who
Right.
aren't in the autistic world, do not have autistic children, aren't autistic themselves."
Right.
And they're like, you're sitting there going, and they're like, we aren't telling you, oh, you need to understand speech and language pathology. You're like,
Right.
yeah, let's discuss the speech problems.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point. That makes a lot of sense because yeah, you're in the world, you know the stuff, so you're tailoring it to what the students actually need instead of you're not in the world trying to make them fit into a box they can't fit into. So that makes a lot of sense for sure.
And I will give credit to these studios that are doing these disability programs. They're doing it because they have a heart for it. They just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
They're like, we want to go save them. We want to give them something. And while we are giving them something at Autistic Wings, it's more, this is just what we know needs to be done. It's not done as oh, you can't have this any other way. This is what you guys need. Does that make sense what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you have any plans for like doing some work with like traditional studios and helping them become more autism friendly, or anybody approaching you wanting to do that kind of stuff?
Most of the approach we've got is how can we make the autistic kids fit into the traditional studios? And I'm like,
You're like, that's not how I, that's not what we're
that's what
doing.
y'all have been doing. Or
Right.
can we
Right.
put your kid, like the autistic kids, behind the neurotypical kids, and like they can be the background dancers? And I'm like,
Right.
it's time for them to step up and hold the spotlight on their own.
Right.
This is, one of the last civil rights movements. And we have also gotten a lot of teachers go, well, I mean, they're mentally incapable of going above a certain age. And I'm like, well, you tell my snarky 13-year-old that, and let me just sit back with the popcorn.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I don't know that it would work in a traditional studio. I think the smaller class sizes, traditional studios have to make money. They can't go
Right.
out and fundraise.
Yep. True.
The dance IEP, I mean, IEPs are fun to begin with.
Yeah.
Trying to explain it to people who have never seen an IEP before, they don't know what it
Yeah.
is. But we are hoping we've got some college professors we've dragged into this IEP process, and we would
Hmm.
like to publish a paper within the next 5 years.
Okay.
Is that going to be something the dance world listens to? I don't know, but maybe we could see something like Autistic Wings start popping up in other towns and other cities across the world.
Right. Well, my mind is kind of right now going to like using the same concepts of what you're doing and then having other things kind of, be more person centered. What are they meeting their needs in that spot? I mean, I feel like you could do it for other types of, I mean, you're doing it for dance. I'm sure there's other types of extracurricular like things people do where you could use something of a similar concept, whereas you're tailoring it specifically for people. So it seems very interesting. You really got me thinking.
Yeah, this year there's there's a gymnastics team in town that
Okay, yeah,
has kind of separated their autistic kids. And they're getting support from the same company we're about to get support from.
sure,
And they've called up and gone, hi, we didn't think about the IEP. Let's
right,
talk.
right,
But they've separated their team stuff. I mean, you know how big gymnastics can get
right,
for team deals. They're
yep,
keeping it down to 3 to 5 kids in a
sure,
group. And they're like, these kids are blooming.
right.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
that makes sense to me. Like gymnastics, I'm thinking like figure skating or anything where yeah, anything like that would be interesting.
I think once we kind of get it tailored for dance and put it out there, I think you could definitely take this and tailor it, kind of
Right,
use what we're doing and go, okay, well, we need to tweak this for gymnastics. Cause one of the things we did was we've broken it down by classes, like how you learn ballet is going to be different than how you learn tap.
right,
You can break it down by what they're doing on floor versus what they're doing on uneven, figure
right.
skating. I think it could change the way we're running extracurriculars for the kids.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, plus you're like meeting them, you're giving them access to something they like to do, meeting their needs where they need to be met, not just like, hey, here's our dance, here's our gymnastics program. You need to change all your stuff, like you're saying, mask, not be yourself. Well, if you want to be in it, which I mean, that you can't do that forever. So at some point, you get upset or burnt out, don't want to do it anymore. So it's really cool.
Definitely. And I know one of Leta's problems was she was feeling bullied. I don't know that the adults were meaning to bully her,
Right.
but the way they were interacting with her, she was coming home crying from dance. And they're like, but I'm trying to be nice.
Right.
And I'm like, well, but if you're asking her to change everything about herself for you to feel comfortable.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would definitely love to see this in more than just dance, martial arts, even.
Yeah. That's true too. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it could do so much.
That's awesome. So what do you think? Is there any something in your background, upbringing, your life? Why do you think this is something that you kind of jumped in all in with or wanted to do instead of just going along with what everybody else has been doing?
Um, I mean, I grew up with the same thing back when in the 80s and 90s when I was doing a lot of the therapies were about masking.
Okay.
which it was, okay, we can do this. I then went into politics and learned all about TRICARE and how to cut the red tape before I had a child,
Mhm.
which needed it. And the number of, how do I put this nicely? The number of people who didn't understand autism saw it as something that could be changed or as something that needed to be fixed. And I'm sitting there going, but I'm autistic. I've
Right.
had interns and junior staffers when Leta was diagnosed as autistic go, oh, well, I could never work with someone who's autistic. And I'm like, yeah, hi, your boss here. You want to say that again? I'm just saying, this is not the way to
Right.
make your boss happy with you. And watching people go, well, you should understand she has to be neurotypical, and me going, why?
Right.
And them going, well, but if she wants to succeed, and uh, then they're listing off people who I know are not neurotypical. And I'm like, congrats. So you've just listed off everyone who's neurodivergent.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, it's was like, so we moved this. And when I have gone in and said, this is what needs to happen, but I came from in high school, I was working with the Science and Cultural Federation District up in Denver, Colorado, which is a district-led nonprofit funding thing. We pay up there, you pay a half penny tax on everything you buy, and it goes to providing grants for all the dance studios and
Okay.
the museums and the zoo and all that. And I was like, oh, well, we can do this.
Right.
It has to be nonprofit. You can't make a profit on.
Right.
There's no way I can ask parents to pay $600 a month for a class.
No. Plus, like you said, I think it gives you the advantage of being able to tailor it more for specifically because, like you shared, like the traditional dance studio, they probably need to pack in as many kids as they can to make money, whereas you don't have to do that since it's more of a nonprofit. So that probably gives you an advantage um, to be able to do some of this stuff, doesn't it?
It does, because if we
Yeah.
were for profit, I would need about 15 to 20 kids per class to keep the lights on.
Yeah, which would not make it work at all like it is right now. So
No, and we have had people go, well, what if you put it up to 40 kids in a class?
that just seems like a lot. Like
It
I wouldn't want
does.
to be in there if I was. I mean, I don't think I could handle all the stimulation if there was that many people.
I kind of sometimes want to roll my eyes at the neurotypical studios going, not saying you don't need to make money, but you guys are having, she had one class where her hip hop class had almost 30 kids in it at 6. And I'm like,
Oh
I'm not handling that many 6-year-olds.
no, for sure.
I know you guys need money, but I don't like.
Yeah. So do you? Let's say, I mean, let's say I'm a parent. My daughter wants to be in dance, and she, all the studios in my town are not. It's just not working out. Like, what do you have any tips for like parents on how they can approach them to help make it more inclusive? Or, I mean, do you have any tips for parents if they're in that situation?
I think you might need to be thinking about whether or not you've got enough autistic kids to make a dance studio like this. I think the number one thing is we have to start educating uh, the entire world what autism is.
Right.
There is still so much misinformation out there. Leta, I've had people come up to me and go, well, Leta's autistic, so she's never going to have the mental capabilities of a 3-year-old. And I'm like, well, okay, we're going to not. um, I've had people get upset over her stimming going, well, she won't let me correct her technique for her subconscious stimming. And I'm just sitting there going, uh,
Right.
you have to advocate. You're not going to be well liked.
Right.
The studio director's going to dislike you. The teachers are going to dislike you. They're all going to say, but I know autism. And then when you go to leave, they're going to be, Leta got told, and I'm not kidding. When we left there, we're like, well, you should have been educating us. And if and I'm like, yeah, okay. And she's sitting there going, well, that's one of the reasons I'm leaving is because you say I need to be educating you. I'm 12. You're not paying me. Either pay me or I'll do my own thing.
Right. Yeah.
I think you as a parent need to realize it's hard and there's going to be a lot of doors slammed in your face. But
Yeah.
it might be if you can find enough other families and find some teachers, we'd love to talk to you about starting this in your own area.
Yeah,
As
you
parents.
brought up a couple like an interesting thing. I mean, for me, the inclusion piece, like the district had a different view of inclusion than we did, so we were always like, smashing into that wall, getting frustrated, and the more I kept having that fight, the more like I thought about just it would be easier just to like maybe even move to somewhere else that was more inclusive instead of fighting. I mean, it's a big decision too to like move somewhere else, but I mean at the end of the day it might be easier long term because you're not having to fight that all the time. So yeah, I can see where once it gets to a certain point it probably is easier quote unquote to like, start your own where you can control more of it, do like run it how you want to, but as a parent that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of things you have to weigh that as well.
It is a lot of work. It was not what I wanted to be doing right now, but
Yeah.
she's right. Especially around here, your options are you can either be autistic and be and the autism classes disappear about 7 or 8 around here.
Okay. Yeah.
After that, I don't know. I guess autism just goes away.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing with the autism classes around here where it's like I get where your guys' hearts are, learn a few things about autism. You have to be potty trained. Most autistic kids are not potty trained until mid elementary school. There's some papers thinking that may be a physical issue.
Hmm.
But the 3-year-old classes, they want potty trained 3-year-olds. And I'm sitting there going, hi, that's cute.
Yeah.
You also have to be verbal. And I'm like, hi, once more, do you understand?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, I get. And I think that's one of the things is you'll have a lot of studios who will go, we understand we are inclusive. It's a big thing right now. We include autistic kids.
Yeah.
They have the heart, they don't have the knowledge. And I'm not
Right.
trying, you kind of have to have the knowledge on this.
For sure. Absolutely. What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something simple everybody can do today to be more inclusive.
I think learn about the differently abled groups and understand what it is versus just kind of thinking you know what it is.
Right. That's great. Yeah, for sure. Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't discussed yet today?
No, I think we did got through everything I would like to discuss. Oh, one minor thing, and this is going to sound so minor. Parents need to quit comparing their children that are complex and differently abled to the neurotypical world.
Right.
Your kids are perfect. I am tired of hearing parents, especially in the early throes of the diagnosis, come up to me and go, "Oh, my child is damaged." Your child is not damaged.
Right.
No matter what your neurotypical friends tell you, your child is not damaged. I don't
Yep.
care what they're differently abled then. They're perfect the way they are. They are the child that was meant to be born. It's going to be a little different than you thought it was going to be,
Right.
but just enjoy the ride.
Yeah. That's also a great tip. Ready for the last question?
Sure.
Do you like spam? Yes or no?
I have an allergy that keeps me from eating a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
I'm deathly allergic to soy and peanuts.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
anything processed, I try to stay away from because I don't like using my EpiPen.
That makes sense. Yeah,
It's
I asked that
expensive.
question because I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make spam and where the spam museum is located. So I've been asking all of my guests if they like spam. It's kind of pretty even actually. So just something
I
I
went
thought
to
I'd.
I went to college with a lot of kids from Hawaii.
Yep, that's
So
a big
spam
thing
was
there.
and they kept going, "Why won't you eat this?" And I'm like, it's not that I hate you. It's just I don't trust anything that's on shared equipment."
Right. Yeah, for
But
sure.
they now have that spray for EpiPens. So maybe I'll look into that.
They have a spray for EpiPens?
Yeah, so it's a nasal spray they just came out with.
Oh, okay.
Instead of trying to jab yourself in a thigh, maybe it'll help some of the schools out because they seem to not
Yeah.
be able to understand how to administer EpiPens.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because my daughter has epilepsy. So when she was younger, the rescue med was rectal diastat, which they also don't like for schools. So then it switched to like a nasal for that too. So that makes sense. They switched that to a nasal.
I've also been teasing a few of my paramedic friends. Maybe now they can learn how to administer it.
Yeah. Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
Well, we've got the podcast that Leta and I co-host, Leta's Tap Styles, and that's anywhere you listen to a podcast.
Sure.
I am usually, if you check out Autistic Wings Dance Company.org,
Sure.
I am all over the place on that. That seems to be my baby right now. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Okay.
I've got Instagram myself, but I'm running everyone else's social accounts. It's iffy if I'm on my own personal
Sure.
accounts,
Yeah.
but those
Sounds
are
good.
the best
Yeah.
places.
I can link up to you. I'll link up all that stuff in the show notes. So that's for sure. Thank you so much for being on the
Well,
show today.
thank you for having me on.
To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inclusive Dad Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, or review the show. Your feedback helps us connect with more champions of inclusion. Remember to share this podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Together we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.